we're starting with oak. This is gonna be my runners and my legs. And then these are aspen, and they're going to be my face boards. We're making a pallet table, but we're not gonna make a table out of pallet wood. We're gonna make what looks like a pallet into a table. I've seen plenty of guys do pallet wood tables where they tear apart old pallets, and they look gorgeous and they're rustic and everything. That's great. But I'm making this for a pallet maker, a scaled down version of one of their pallets, make it into a coffee table.
I don't know if this is gonna work. It might look like a joke.
You don't know until you try. So it's time to start cutting some wood. I've cleaned the mold really well. I vacuumed it out. I wiped it out. I put some mold release in. Epoxy. This will take about 1.5 gallons of epoxy, and that's going to be kind of a optical illusion. Somebody's going to come up and say, "Oh, that's just a pallet," and then they're going to realize, "Oh, wait, no, it's a table, and it's solid."
Bring on the epoxy.
So you can see it's all one continuous color. There's no streaks. So next step is to pour it into the mold. I got the epoxy in. It's really, really hard to see because it's clear. You can barely even tell there's anything in there. And it's kind of like an illusion. But it's like there's nothing there. If it wasn't for the glare of the lights, you wouldn't even be able to tell there was epoxy in it. It's amazing stuff. While the tabletop is curing, and it's curing very nicely. I didn't find any bubbles this morning, which is nice. We're gonna work on the runners, which are gonna go across the face pieces, and then also the legs. Here we go.
A tool I use all the time is the ShopFox W1854 18-inch open-end drum sander. It's great for small shops, and the open-ended design allows you to sand things even larger than 18 inches. It has a variable speed feed belt, has dust collection, and can accommodate pieces up to 4.5 inches thick. It's a great sander.
So we wanted to leave these legs kind of rustic. There's a bunch of cracks in these legs. I wanted to leave the cracks, but I filled them in with epoxy, so it'll look like the cracks are still there. It'll kind of leave a cool effect. We'll see, maybe.
After doing the preliminary sanding, I found a whole bunch of voids and valleys and edges and bubbles underneath where my hold downs were. In hindsight, I could have saved myself a whole lot of time, effort, and extra sanding if I would have used my runners as my hold downs. Oh well, live and learn, do it next time.
All right, so I got the table back in the mold, and I've got the slots or the spots marked for the runners.
So another coat of epoxy. This will level off the bottom of the table, and it will also be deep enough where I can submerge those runners into it about 1/4 inch. That'll be more than enough support and strong enough where I won't have to use screws or brackets to attach them to the top. At first glance, I thought the epoxy was perfect. Unfortunately, there were a couple major flaws and some bubbles on the top of the runners. So I'm going to have to grind those out and make some patches with epoxy. If I do it right, you won't even see them.
We've got the bubbles cut out, and yeah, this looks really drastic, but those bubbles were all the way at the bottom, almost at the bottom of the epoxy. So these are deep holes. And it's deceiving because the bubbles look like they're just right almost at the surface, but they're not. They're way down in there. So I had to cut trenches in here. And I don't like to do that, but if you're careful about it and you clean them up real good before you fill them, they do all but disappear.
The epoxy was good and flat, but there were still a few high points, so I decided to use my belt sander instead of putting it into my flattening sled. Sanded it nice and flat, almost all the way down to the wood. We still have to fill those voids and holes, but first I'm going to trim the edges. My camera decided to stop working while I was attaching the legs, but I used 6 2.5 inch long countersunk pocket screws for each leg, more than strong enough for this coffee table. Here I'm cutting plugs for the screw holes out of a piece of the same oak so it'll match perfectly. You'll never even know those screws are there. Here I'm building up dams of silicone caulking around the places that I have to patch with the epoxy. Since the epoxy shrinks as it cures, I need to fill these holes slightly above the level of the table. Then once it's done curing, I just sand off the excess. Special thanks to Kyle and Kendall at K&J Lumber. Like, subscribe, links down below. As always, love you.
See ya!